Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. We are doing my February reading wrap up. We read 16 books in February, which is on the lower end for what I typically read, but still a lot of books. I think it was quite a successful month, especially considering I didn't read for like 8-9 days while flying to New York. I didn't read at all when I was away or when I got back for a bit as I was unwell. We got 5 out of 6 books on my official YouTube TBR read. We just kind of ran out of time and the books we read were quite big. Like I think the biggest book that I read this month was just under 1,000 pages long, which is a big book. But I had a fun time reading and surprisingly, well not really surprisingly because I've been really mood reading, but a lot of the books I read were on Kindle. But my physical stack unintentionally follows a colour scheme. February apparently was a very blue month for me. What did we read? I read the first 2 books in the Lady of Darkness series. So we read Lady of Darkness and also Lady of Shadows by Melissa K. Rorick. Now I love this series. I love the Legacy series. That's a 6-star series for me personally of hers, but I did really enjoy this too. I think so far books were like 4 and 4.5 stars. I haven't had 5-star feel about a specific book yet, but I am kind of getting 5-star feelings about this series. Like if it continues to be as good as these two or improve, I think it could be 5 stars. I have heard people say that it gets even better, and the best part about this series are the side characters. Now in book 1 we sort of just followed the main characters, and in book 2 we started to meet a lot of, you know, the side characters, and I can see how we're gonna get their own sort of storylines and plots developing, so I'm very excited about that. Book 3 has just been published in the UK because the book series is being traditionally republished here, so I do have a physical copy of book 3 and I do think I'm going to try and read it in the month of March. I've unofficially added it to my TBR for the month of March, so that would be good if we can keep up to date with it. We did spend January and February completing series I'm in the middle of or getting as far up to date of series that I'm also in the middle of, so I'm trying to read new releases as they come out to stay on top of them. Our book club book of the month was Legendborn. My book club is free to join. It's on Fable. Anyone can join, and my book club members get a specific book club reading vlog. Anyone in my book club will have had access to the reading vlog. I always get questions of people saying how can they find the reading vlog. Make sure you have your app notifications turned on because I do post club announcements and tag the club, so you will get notified when the book club reading vlog is ready. If you don't get notifications or you haven't seen it, I share the link in the kickoff chat at the end of each month, so you can go through the archive to the previous kickoff months and get the reading vlog playlist. The videos will never be public on my channel. They are just for book club members only. It's exclusive for people who are in the book club, and again it's free to join. I always have it linked down in my description below. But this was so fun. This was a YA urban fantasy of our main female character Bree dealing with grief and the loss of her mother, and she witnesses some type of magic when her mom passes. Her memories are wiped, but she starts to get her memories back, and she goes on this journey to try and uncover the truth because she thinks that her mom was actually murdered, or, you know, the car accident they're saying that she got into wasn't actually a car accident, and she's trying to figure out why and who wiped her memories and how they did it. Bree starts to get caught up in a lot of dangerous situations, but also puts herself in a very risky situation and tries to make alliances with people who could maybe help her find answers. But there's a lot of suspense. There's an entire group of characters. We are in like a college setting, but she is 16. But I have ordered book number 2 to come, so I can pick it up immediately when it arrives. I will be continuing with the series. It was really well written. Really enjoyed how different it was to other books I've read. Like I have read a lot of YA fantasy books, but none of them have really been urban fantasies. They're all more like fairy tale fantasies, quite whimsical, romantic as well, whereas this has romance in it, but it is very plot heavy. There's a lot of interesting magic and secrets going on, and just like the layers and the levels and the ending and the plot twist. Like I saw some of them, but I also was so caught off guard by a lot of them. In YA I feel like it's easier to predict, but it still had me like reeling. The Hurricane Wars. I tried to read this in a 24-hour readathon and I wish I DNF'd it. It was 1.5 stars. I just thought the first 200 pages could have been cut out. Like it could have been condensed. It was just going on and on and on and on and on and on and on about things that we didn't need to go on and on about. I actually saw a TikTok about this book that was like, this is why you should read it. It was 2 enemies in this war that hate each other end up getting in a forced marriage of some sort to each other, and they can't stand each other. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. Oh, that's just like maybe 50 pages. We get that. And it's not that it's not a fantasy romance, because a big part of the plot is. It's just that the other 90% of the book, there isn't really even a plot. Yeah. not going to continue that one. We have Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. Now this was, I think, one of the most talked about books on Book Talk in the month of February because a lot of people just did not like it. I have mixed feelings about it. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars because it's my least favorite Ali Hazelwood book, but I feel like if you like Ali Hazelwood books then you would still probably enjoy this. If you don't read Ali Hazelwood and you're going into this book wanting this like super spicy sports romance that explores kinks and stuff, it doesn't read like that, but it's like an Ali Hazelwood version of that. Does that make sense? The same way that a lot of people went into Bride thinking it would be this big fantasy book, and it wasn't. It's just the typical Ali Hazelwood formula with a paranormal twist. I actually wrote quite a thorough Goodreads review for this, so let's see, what did I say? Oh yeah, so the pros of this book was I love Ali Hazelwood's writing. I will read absolutely everything she writes. We get an Olive and Adam cameo, and I binged it in one sitting. The cons were everyone sucked. The short chapters were sometimes half a page, especially the ones about the therapy, and it felt very random. I felt like we could have cut them from the book and it wouldn't have changed absolutely anything about the story. The therapy chapters themselves, there was no growth or development for our main female character with her therapist. Like, any growing she did was from the main male character and conversations with him and opening up to him. So I was kind of like, what's the point? And also his pet nickname for her was Troll. City of Souls and Sinners by Kayla Edwards. This is the second book in the House of Devils series. I'm currently reading book 3. I started it at the end of the month, but I didn't finish it yet. So that's why it's not included in my wrap up. It's gonna roll over into the month of March, but I had a very fun time reading this book. I do really love the House of Devils series. I think it could be one of my favorite fantasy book series. It's adult urban fantasy. I know a lot of people didn't enjoy book 1 or had mixed feelings about book 1 with comparisons to Crescent City, but I think book 2, absolutely nothing like it. Like, the storyline and the plot and the way that the book develops and the story develops, books 2 and 3 are so different that I would give the series a chance if you read book 1 and put it down. Like, pick up book 2 and try again. We started to get points of views from other characters in this. We have a big found family cast and a cast of side characters in this book and this world, and in books 2 we do explore that a lot more and we see other points of view. I think book 3 is my favorite so far, but this was 4 stars. Very, very fun. Don't be scared by how big and chunky the books are, because when you read them on Kindle you do fly through it. I think the way she writes is very easy to understand, and we're kind of just like jumping straight to the point, though I do highlight a lot in my Kindle of quotes and things she says because it just hits so hard. I love the way she writes because it's really easy to jump into and quite casual, but not too casual that it's not written beautifully. Does that make sense? I just think it is written well. Now onto the Kindle reads or library reads or books that I no longer have physically or read digitally. We read A Promise of Peridot, which is the Sacred Stones book number 2. I think you can say Peridot or Peridot. I tried to Google it and I don't know. I read book 1 and I enjoyed book 1, but I unhauled the physical book because I was like, I'm not obsessed with it, but I do enjoy reading the books when I'm reading them. I think it's a series where if you're going in and expecting obsessive 5-6 star feelings, probably not going to give you that, but if you want just like a fun escapism, giggly, low stakes, like, I mean, it's high stakes because there's a lot of things happening, but it doesn't feel high stakes, if that makes sense. Like, I'm reading it and I'm like, wow, there's a war happening and people are dying, but it doesn't feel that deep. We've got different romance subplots and snippets, and I do actually really like the main male character in this book, and our main female character is a healer. It's the second book in a series, so I can't say too much about like the plot point and where it goes, but a lot of people don't like book 2, you know, middle book syndrome, but I pleasantly was surprised going into it. I thought that I wouldn't like it as much as I did. So this was a 3-star read for me, and I am waiting at my local library to get a copy of book number 3 so I can finish the series finally. I read Fireborn, which is the first book in the Aurelian cycle. I've had so many people tell me to read this book, and it was on my 25 for 2025, and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. The more I've thought about it, the more I did enjoy it. So I do wish we got more exploration and depth into the world, because I did feel like we were just getting told about things that were happened rather than being shown it. Like, big things would happen in the plot and in the story, but it would just be like, oh, and this happened. And I'm like, wait, we could have gone into that and delved a bit deeper in and I would have cared maybe more. So I feel like we barely scratched the surface of this book, these characters, this story, and this world, and I just wanted more. And every time I found myself getting really invested in a scene that was happening or a plot point, I just found like we just moved on so quickly from it that I was just like, oh, what was the point of that? But I did love the actual story and plot and premise and some of the characters. So I will be continuing the series. It does give Dragon War College vibes, but I've seen a lot of people promote it or talk about it in a way that compares it to Fourth Wing, and I think if you think it's going to be anything like Fourth Wing, you're going to be disappointed because it's absolutely not like Fourth Wing at all. But we do have Dragon Riders and we do have dual point of view for the two main characters, and they are a male main character and a female main character who are sort of born enemies, then went to friends, then went to academic rivals, to acquaintances, to a slow burn maybe romance, to who the fuck knows honestly after book one. It's a bit all over the place in that department and I kind of love that. I read the last book in the Play to Prisoner series. I can't believe that is a 6-book series that we have completed. I think I've read almost all of the books except for book 6, like in reading vlogs on my channel across the last year. I gave it a 3.75. I personally don't love the final books in a series typically. They're never usually my highest rated, so I would take that with a grain of salt. I just think for me nothing will compare to the way books 2 and 3 made me feel. Like I think books 2 and 3 in the whole series were my absolute favorites, and that is like the standard, like comparing all the other books after it. Though I do think book 6 is better than books 4 and 5. So if you have read books 4 and 5 and you haven't finished it yet, I do think the last book rounds out the series and wraps everything up and concludes it in a good way, but it's not my favorite in the series, so I can't give it like a 4.5 or 5 star. The next books you saw me read because Bailey, Mariana and Larry picked them for me. So I read Amid Clouds and Bones, of which Bailey got me to read, and I actually had so much fun with this. If you watch my reading vlog, you'll already know my thoughts and my ratings on these books, but this was a 4-star read. It's a standalone fantasy, and standalone fantasies are always a difficult one because for fantasies you got world building and you need to have time to get like connected and invested to the characters, especially when there's like a magic system and there's always politics involved. So for the amount of pages we had, I feel like it was done quite well, and it does focus on the romance story more than anything, but there were some really interesting politics happening in the background and figuring out how the world worked and why certain plot points were happening. I was very confused at who the love interest was supposed to be, but that was a fun part of the plot where at one point I was like, I kind of hate everyone, but I kind of want this one to like win, but I kind of hate him, but maybe I don't, but I do, but oh no, I definitely hate the other one. It's one of those where you're like, oh, like I think it was a love triangle that was done well, because it wasn't really a love triangle, but it was. It had me for a minute there, like it actually had me. I was questioning everything, but if you saw me read the book, you know I had such a fun time with it. We read Haunting Adeline, the first book in the cat and mouse duet. I don't know if I will be reading book 2 and if or when I will be, but I read this because Laura made me read it and there was no way I would have picked it up by myself if it wasn't for Laura. Book 2 I have heard is a lot more triggering, a lot darker, different vibes to book 1. Yeah, book 1 for a dark romance was kind of just giving general dark romance vibes. I understand why so many people don't like it, but at the same time I also don't understand why it's so hated, because it's just a dark romance. Book number 2 though, I could understand why that could maybe be too far for people just based off the trigger warnings I've read and reading other people's reviews. So mixed feelings on that one, which is why I haven't picked it up yet and didn't read it in this month. But I just think I described it as being not as bad as what I thought it was going to be, but also just as bad / if not worse. And for some reason that just makes sense in my head. So 3 stars for that one. I read Her Soul to Take because it was one of Larry's favorite books, and I think she described it as demon romance, dark romance and small town romance in one. And that was kind of a good way to sum it up. I've heard some people say that books 2 and 3 in the series are even better than book 1, and after finishing book 1 and seeing that they kind of happen in the same timeline but following the other characters that we met, I am intrigued. It was very lusty, like it did just kind of jump straight into, oh, they're really interested in each other and it's quite a physical thing. I found the plot in this more interesting than the romance itself. It was a 2.75 star because again, half of 5 is 2.5 and 5 stars being absolutely perfect, amazing, wouldn't change a thing. Half of that 2 is, it's an okay book. It's not bad, it's not excellent, it's just a decent read, and that's exactly what this book was. So I think it deserves a little bit more than 2.5, so 2.75. Nocticadia is the book that Mariana got me to pick as one of her favourite books, and the only other Carrie Lake book I have read is Anathema, which is a dark gothic fantasy with a minor subplot of romance, but that was dark, like borderline too dark for me, and I just, yeah, was so unsure. So I didn't go and read any of her other books, and this was a dark academia, and I think I like the dark academia vibes. This was 4.5 stars. This was so fun. Literally had to put the book down so many times to scream because of the things that were happening. I do think it is worth the hype, but I can definitely see how it's not for everyone because there are worms and parasites and like it's gross. Only Kerry Lake could make worms sexy like that. Like the slow burn payoff was so good. So good. But I did have some questions towards the end of the book that didn't get resolved. The last page in the book as well, I also pretend that that doesn't exist. Otherwise it probably would have been a 5 stars. I read Swordcatcher, which is Cassandra Clare's new adult fantasy book series. I think this is her first adult work. I could be wrong. She has, what, The Mortal Instruments, The Infernal Devices, so many popular book series that are YA, and I own the first book in the Mortal Instruments series, but I haven't read it yet. My book reader toxic trait, red flag, is that I won't go and read an author's best work or most popular work first. I will typically go and read their most recent work. So I did that with Kerry Lake, I did it with Elsie Silver, I did it with Rena Kent, and now I've done it with Cassandra Clare. So it feels a bit less daunting committing to reading one new book or one series that's out to see if that author might be for you or not, and then going back and reading like the popular hyped loved ones, because then you can kind of see why they're popular. But also I'm not comparing it to her previous work, so someone who has read all of her work before will probably have a completely different opinion and view to me because they are comparing it to previous works. I am comparing it to nothing, and I really enjoyed it. I had no expectations going in and I had such a fun time. This is like my favorite kind of fantasy book that has like subplots of romance. Like we really are focusing on the fantasy and the fantasy characters and the magic system and where the story is going, but the best part about this book for me was from the jump we were following multiple characters. Like we have 2 main characters that we're sort of focusing on. They live in 2 different parts of the world. We know I love my fantasy books that kind of follow this narrative, but in opposite sides of this kingdom and have completely different roles. So many players in the game and they have their own best friends and things that are going on, and they end up meeting and kind of working together. Unlike other books where it was kind of kept secret, there was other characters being brought in. These changes in this world are being made, but I love a kingdom and a castle setting and politics to do with that. So we have like an entire court of things going on, but also these magical outcasts, and then we have this rag picker king who is like this criminal lord, and then we get like crumbs of like tension and yearning and banter, and oh my god, I can see where the romance subplots are going to come in and how they're going to develop, and I actually think they could ruin my life. They have the potential to be so good, and I love all the female main characters that we have. The definition of let them undermine me. Yeah. So that was 4 stars. I read Caught Up, which is the 3rd book in the Windy City series. It was so good. It was 4.5 stars. I think I could have a 5-star book in this series, but I really, really loved this. I also gave book 2 4.5 stars, and I completely skipped book 1. I haven't read book 1. I will be reading book 4 in March. As you know, we picked it for my TBR. Very excited for that because Mariana says she thinks book 4 could be my favorite, but this is like a millionaire baseball playing single dad with a nanny trope. So if that's your kind of thing, pick this up. I have thought about this book multiple times since I finished it. They're just such fun romance. Like I love the men in these books, or the 2 men that I've read so far. Like Ryan Shea in book 2, everything. Like the way they treat their women, they think about their women, their words, their actions. It's just like some of the best men that I've ever read about in contemporary romance. So I really like that. And even though we do have a lot of similar tropes in other contemporary romance books, I feel like they're done so differently, but it's also kind of my first sports romances. I don't know, there could be others that they're similar to, but I'm having such a fun time reading the series. It's such a good interconnected series, palette cleanser reads for me. And then the final book I read was Vow of Deception by Rena Kent. So I started the Deception trilogy because I'm making my way through the Renaverse, as we know, as I was absolutely obsessed with Legacy of Gods. Nothing has like hit that or gone anywhere close to feeling how I feel about those books, but there's just something very comforting to me about Rena Kent's writing. Like it's just bingeable. Her earlier works are like 200 pages each, so they're really fast to get through. They make you feel productive, but then you're also, I've read the 2nd gen series first, and then I'm coming back and reading about their parents, so I kind of know who these characters are. I don't think anything is like spoiled for me because there's still a lot of plot twists and things, but it's fun to go back and go, like this makes sense and I can see this from this and connect the dots, and yeah, it's like a comfort reads for me. So I'm slowly working my way through the Reaniverse. I will definitely finish it this year, but I only had time to read the first book. Didn't have time to read the entire trilogy. Very busy month for me. March is also busy for me too. Life is getting very busy at the moment, but we're still reading way more. Like, I've consistently managed to read at least 15 books upwards each month for the last year, which is crazy because before that I read like 5 in a year, so we're doing great. And this year is all about quality of books that we're reading and having fun over quantity. They are all the books that I read in the month of February. Yay! Another video, another vlog done. So the next vlogs I have for you guys are actual vlogs and reading vlogs coming, so make sure you are subscribed if you aren't already. But I would love to know what your top read of February was. Comment down below what your highest rated best book of the month was. I'm looking for new books to top up my TBR cart with, or if there's any books that I have that you love that I need to go and pick up ASAP, let me know. See you guys. Bye.